On a crowded Saturday afternoon at Westridge Mall, 17-year-old Eli Carter stood frozen in the food court, his hands flapping nervously as a group of 5 teenagers surrounded him, mocking his voice and mimicking his movements. His father, Marcus Carter, a founding member of the Iron Riders MC, was across town at a charity event, unaware his son was being humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers. But when a witness recorded the scene and sent it to a biker forum, the message reached Marcus in seconds. Within 12 minutes, the rumble of 40 Harley engines filled the parking lot like rolling thunder. The bikers didn't come to fight. They came to teach a lesson in respect, humanity, and the consequences of cruelty. What unfolded next was recorded by dozens of phones and shared across the nation, a moment of raw justice that reminded the world that some lines should never be crossed. The mockers expected laughter. They got a wall of leather, steel, and silence that would haunt them forever. This is the story of a father's love, a brotherhood's loyalty, and a community that stood up when it mattered most. It's about the power of presence, the weight of dignity, and the unforgettable lesson that sometimes the loudest statement is made without a single word. If you're ready to witness what happens when cruelty meets accountability, stay with us. This story will restore your faith in humanity. The fluorescent lights of Westridge Mall hummed overhead as Saturday afternoon shoppers moved through the food court like a slow river. The smell of grease and cinnamon pretzels mixed with the chatter of families, the beeping of arcade games, and the distant echo of pop music from a clothing store. Eli Carter sat alone at a corner table, carefully arranging his chicken nuggets into a perfect row, his fingers tapping a rhythm only he could hear. He was 17, tall and thin, with sandy blonde hair that fell into his eyes. His black hoodie had a faded logo of his favorite band, and his sneakers were worn at the edges from walking the same path every day. Eli liked patterns. He liked predictability. The food court on Saturdays was part of his routine. Order 6 nuggets, sit at table 14, watch the people pass by. But today, the pattern broke. "Yo, check out this dude," a voice said from behind him, sharp and mocking. Eli's shoulders tensed. He didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the nuggets, counting them silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. "Dude's literally playing with his food like a little kid," another voice added, followed by a burst of laughter. There were 5 of them, teenagers around his age, maybe older. They wore sagging jeans, expensive sneakers, and smirks that dripped with entitlement. The leader, a stocky kid with a buzz cut and a gold chain, stepped closer. "Hey man, you okay?" the leader said in a high-pitched, exaggerated tone, mimicking Eli's voice. "You need help cutting your chicken?" The others laughed louder now, pulling out their phones to record. Eli's hands began to flap at his sides, a self-soothing gesture he'd done since childhood. His breathing quickened. He wanted to leave, but his legs wouldn't move. The noise around him grew louder, the lights brighter. Everything felt like too much. "Oh snap, he's doing the bird thing," one of the mockers said, flapping his arms wildly. The group erupted in laughter, drawing the attention of nearby tables. Some people looked away uncomfortably. Others filmed. No one intervened. "Leave him alone," a woman's voice called from a few tables over, but it was drowned out by the laughter. The leader leaned in closer, his breath smelling of energy drinks and arrogance. "What's wrong, buddy? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just too weird to talk?" Eli's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't make a sound. He stared at the table, his hands still flapping, his mind screaming for the world to stop spinning. The mockers kept going, their cruelty feeding off each other like gasoline on a fire. What they didn't know was that someone in the crowd had already sent a message. A single video clip uploaded to a private forum with the caption, "Eli Carter, Westridge Mall." Now, within seconds, the screen of a phone 30 miles away lit up. Marcus Carter, standing in a parking lot beside his Harley, felt his blood turn to ice as he watched his son being torn apart by strangers. He didn't hesitate. He made one call. "Rally the brothers. Westridge. Now. 40 engines answered. Marcus Carter stood outside the Veterans Hall, his leather vest creased from hours of sitting through speeches and handshakes. The charity event had been good. Raising funds for homeless vets always mattered to him, but his mind was already drifting toward home. He checked his phone out of habit, scrolling past messages from the club, a reminder about oil changes, a meme from his buddy Ray. Then he saw it, a notification from the Iron Riders Forum. Someone had tagged him with a red alert emoji. Marcus opened it, and his world tilted. The video was shaky, filmed from across the food court, but the image was clear. Eli, surrounded, hands flapping, eyes wide with fear. The audio was worse. Laughter, mocking voices, the exaggerated mimicry of his son's speech. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. His hands shook as he replayed the video, each second carving deeper into his chest. Eli didn't deserve this. No one did. But Eli, his boy, who saw the world in colors and patterns no one else could see, who loved model trains and could name every motorcycle engine by sound, Eli was the gentlest soul Marcus had ever known. He dialed without thinking. The phone rang once before Ray answered. "What's up, brother?" "Westridge Mall, food court. Eli's in trouble." Marcus's voice was calm, but beneath it was a current of fury that could level mountains. "I need everyone. Now." Ray didn't ask questions. "On my way. I'll spread the word." The line went dead. Marcus sent the video to the club's group chat with a single word: move. Within 3 minutes, phones buzzed across the county. Mechanics wiped grease from their hands. Warehouse workers clocked out early. A retired firefighter kissed his wife and headed for the garage. They didn't need details. The call was enough. Marcus threw his leg over his bike, a 1998 Harley Softail with enough miles to circle the earth twice. The engine roared to life, a deep growl that vibrated through his ribs. He didn't wait for the others. He just rode. The wind tore at his face as he carved through traffic, his mind locked on one image. Eli's face, frozen in fear. Behind him the sound began to build. One engine, then 2, then 10. By the time Marcus hit the highway, the roar was deafening. 40 Harleys in tight formation, a rolling wave of chrome and fury. Drivers pulled to the side, eyes wide, as the convoy thundered past. There were no sirens, no lights, just the unmistakable presence of men who had heard the call and answered without hesitation. Ray pulled up beside Marcus, his grey beard whipping in the wind. He gave a single nod. Marcus nodded back. No words were needed. They weren't going to fight, they weren't going to threaten, they were going to stand. And sometimes that was enough. The mall was 12 minutes away. Eli was still sitting at table 14, surrounded by strangers who had no idea what was coming. The sound hit the mall before the bikers did. It started as a low rumble, distant and primal, like thunder rolling across a flat plain. Shoppers near the parking lot paused mid-step, their heads turning toward the horizon. The rumble grew louder, deeper, until it wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, a vibration that rattled windows and set off car alarms. Then they appeared. 40 motorcycles rolled into the Westridge Mall parking lot in perfect formation, 2 wide engines growling in unison. The lead rider was Marcus Carter, his face hidden behind dark sunglasses, his leather vest bearing the Iron Riders patch. A steel eagle gripping a wrench and a road. Behind him a wall of chrome and muscle. Men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, some with grey beards, some with scarred knuckles, all with the same expression of quiet, unshakable resolve. They didn't speed. They didn't rev their engines unnecessarily. They simply moved, slow and deliberate, like a tide that couldn't be stopped. Shoppers stood frozen, phones raised, filming the scene. Security guards exchanged nervous glances, but didn't approach. There was no aggression in the bikers' movements, only purpose. Marcus killed his engine first. The others followed one by one, until the parking lot fell silent, except for the ticking of cooling metal and the distant hum of the mall's ventilation system. Marcus swung off his bike and looked at Ray. "Stay tight. No words, just presence." Ray nodded and relayed the message with hand signals. The bikers dismounted in unison, forming a loose line. They didn't rush. They walked, boots crunching on asphalt, leather creaking toward the mall entrance. People stepped aside instinctively, creating a path. A mother pulled her child close. A security guard spoke into his radio, his voice shaking. Inside the food court, the mockers were still laughing. The leader had his phone out, narrating a video for his followers. "Y'all gotta see this kid. He's legit tweaking out over some nuggets. This is content, bro." Eli sat motionless, tears streaming silently down his face, his hands pressed flat against the table to stop them from shaking. Then the noise changed. The ambient chatter of the food court dropped to a whisper. Heads turned toward the entrance. The sound of boots, heavy, rhythmic, deliberate, echoed across the tile floor. One by one, the bikers entered. They didn't shout, they didn't point. They simply walked, forming a semicircle around table 14. The leader looked up from his phone and froze. His smirk faltered. The laughter died. 40 men stood in silence, arms crossed, eyes locked on the group of mockers. Marcus stepped forward, removed his sunglasses, and looked directly at the leader. His voice was low, calm, and colder than stone. "You done?" The leader's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His friends shuffled backward, their bravado evaporating like steam. One of them dropped his phone. The clatter was the only sound in the entire food court. Marcus didn't break eye contact. "I asked if you were done." The food court fell silent. Westridge Mall, Indiana, 2:47 p.m. 40 men stood between a father and the cruelty his son had endured, and the lesson was just beginning. Marcus Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The presence of 40 silent men was louder than any shout, heavier than any threat. He stood 3 feet from the leader of the mockers, his arms loose at his sides, his gaze steady and unblinking. The kid, maybe 19, with a gold chain and a fading smirk, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. His tone wasn't harsh. It was worse. It was patient, like a teacher waiting for a student to realize their mistake. The kid swallowed hard. Jaden. Jaden, Marcus nodded slowly. "You think it's funny, Jaden? Mocking someone who can't defend themselves?" Jaden's eyes darted to his friends, but they were backing away, distancing themselves from the situation. One of them had already slipped into the crowd. Another was staring at his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Jaden was alone. I didn't mean," he stammered. "You didn't mean what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm. "You didn't mean to humiliate my son in front of hundreds of people? You didn't mean to record it and laugh while he cried?" He tilted his head slightly. "Which part didn't you mean, Jaden?" The kid's face went pale. Your son?" Marcus stepped aside, gesturing to Eli, who was still sitting at the table, his hands now gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. "That's my son. His name is Eli. He's 17. He likes trains, motorcycles, and building things with his hands. He's smarter than anyone in this mall, including you. And he's autistic." Marcus let the word hang in the air. "Does that make him less human to you?" Jaden shook his head quickly, his voice cracking. No, man, I swear." "Then why?" Marcus's voice dropped even lower. "Why did you think it was okay to treat him like that?" Jaden had no answer. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Behind Marcus, the bikers stood motionless, a wall of leather and steel. Their silence was suffocating. It wasn't menacing, it was disappointment, and somehow that was worse. Ray, standing to Marcus's left, spoke for the first time. His voice was gravelly, weathered by decades of hard living and harder lessons. "You know what we do, kid? We protect people. We raise money for veterans, for kids in hospitals, for families who lost everything in fires. We show up when no one else does." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And you You show up to make someone feel small, that make you feel big. Jaden's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he whispered. Marcus didn't move. You're not sorry yet, but you will be. He turned to Ray. Get the manager. I want this on record. Ray nodded and walked toward the food court office. The crowd of onlookers had swelled to over 100 people, phones raised, recording every second. The video would be online within minutes, shared thousands of times by nightfall. But Marcus didn't care about going viral. He cared about making sure this never happened to Eli or anyone else again. A mall security supervisor appeared, flanked by 2 guards. He looked nervous, his hand hovering near his radio. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to... We're not here to cause trouble, Marcus said evenly. We're here because your mall allowed my son to be harassed for 10 minutes while people filmed it. I want to know what you're going to do about it. The supervisor blinked, caught off guard. We can review the footage and... No need. Marcus pulled out his phone and played the video. The supervisor's face tightened as he watched. When it ended, Marcus pocketed the phone. Those kids are banned, permanently, and I want a formal apology to my son, in writing. The supervisor nodded quickly. Absolutely. I'll handle it personally. Marcus turned back to Jaden, who was now openly crying. You're going to apologize to Eli. Right now. And you're going to mean it. Jaden nodded, his legs shaking as he walked toward the table. Eli hadn't moved. He was staring at the floor, his breathing shallow. Jaden knelt down, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry. I was being a jerk. You didn't deserve that. Eli didn't respond. He didn't look up, but his hands stopped shaking. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. It's okay, Eli. We're going home. Marcus guided Eli out of the food court with a gentle hand on his back, shielding him from the sea of cameras and curious eyes. The bikers parted silently, forming a corridor that led straight to the exit. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft shuffle of boots on tile and the distant hum of the mall's air conditioning. Eli kept his eyes down, his hands tucked into the pocket of his hoodie. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The 40 motorcycles stood in perfect rows, gleaming under the light like sentinels. Marcus led Eli to his bike and pulled a spare helmet from the saddlebag. You remember how to hold on? He asked quietly. Eli nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Yeah. Marcus fastened the helmet under Eli's chin, checking the strap twice. Good. We're just going home. No stops, no talk, just ride. He swung onto the bike and felt Eli climb on behind him, arms wrapping hesitantly around his waist. Marcus patted his son's hand. I got you. The other bikers mounted their machines without a word. Ray gave Marcus a nod, and the engines roared to life in unison, a deep, thunderous symphony that drowned out the rest of the world. Marcus kicked his bike into gear and pulled out of the lot, the convoy falling into formation behind him. They rode through the city streets like a moving fortress, the rumble of engines echoing off storefronts and apartment buildings. People stopped on sidewalks to watch, some waving, others filming. Marcus didn't acknowledge them. His focus was on the boy behind him, the way Eli's grip tightened slightly whenever they turned, the way his breathing slowed as the miles stretched out. Riding had always been Eli's escape. When the world became too loud, too bright, too overwhelming, the steady hum of the engine and the rush of wind brought him back to center. Marcus had taught him that. On weekends, they'd ride out to the old quarry, just the two of them, and sit in silence while the sun set. It was their language, one that didn't require words. As they left the city limits and hit the open highway, the tension in Eli's posture began to ease. His head tilted slightly to the side, watching the blur of trees and fields pass by. Marcus felt it too, the weight lifting, the anger softening into something quieter. The road had a way of doing that. Ray pulled up alongside them, matching Marcus's speed. He didn't say anything, just rode close, a silent reminder that they weren't alone. Behind them, the other bikers followed, spread across both lanes. a protective shield against the rest of the world. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled into the driveway of a modest two-story house with a gravel path and a wooden porch. He killed the engine and helped Eli off the bike, removing the helmet carefully. Eli's hair was matted with sweat, his eyes red but dry. He looked up at his father for the first time since leaving the mall. "Thanks, Dad," Eli said softly. Marcus's throat tightened. He pulled his son into a hug, resting his chin on top of Eli's head. "You don't have to thank me. That's what I'm here for." Ray and a few of the other bikers had followed them home, parking their bikes along the curb. Ray approached, his expression gentle. "You good, kid?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Ray smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. "Good, 'cause we're having a barbecue next weekend, and your old man promised you'd bring those model trains you've been working on. Deal?" Eli's lips twitched into the smallest hint of a smile. "Deal." The bikers didn't linger. They said their goodbyes with nods and fist bumps, then mounted their bikes and rode off into the fading light. Marcus stood on the porch with Eli, watching them disappear down the street, the rumble of engines fading into the distance. Inside, Marcus made grilled cheese sandwiches while Eli sat at the kitchen table, arranging his trains into neat lines. The silence was comfortable now, no longer heavy with fear or shame, just father and son, sharing space, breathing the same air. "Dad?" Eli said after a while. "Yeah, bud? Those guys, they didn't have to do that." Marcus set the plate down in front of Eli and sat across from him. "Yeah, they did. That's what family does." Eli thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "I'm glad they're my family." Marcus smiled, the first real smile since seeing that video. "Me too, Eli. Me too. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button. It keeps us going." By Monday morning, the video had gone viral. Not the original mockery, though that had been shared too, sparking outrage across social media, but the footage of 40 bikers walking silently into the mall, surrounding the mockers and demanding accountability. News outlets picked it up. Local stations ran segments. A hashtag trended, "Iron Riders Justice." Marcus woke to over 200 notifications on his phone, messages from strangers thanking him, interview requests from talk shows, a voicemail from the mayor's office asking if he'd be willing to speak at a community event about bullying and autism awareness. He deleted most of them. He wasn't interested in fame. He just wanted his son to feel safe. Eli, however, had a different reaction. That morning, as Marcus drove him to school, Eli was quieter than usual. He stared out the window, his fingers tapping a rhythm on his knee. Marcus glanced over. "You okay?" "People are going to talk about it," Eli said. "Probably. I don't like being talked about." Marcus pulled into the school parking lot and put the truck in park. He turned to face his son. "I know. But here's the thing, Eli. They're not talking about what happened to you. They're talking about what happened after. They're talking about how 40 men showed up because they believed you mattered. That's not a bad story." Eli considered this, his brow furrowed. "Do I matter?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He reached over and gripped Eli's shoulder. "You matter more than anything in this world. To me, to Ray, to every single one of those guys who showed up. Don't ever doubt that." Eli nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay." Marcus waited until Eli grabbed his backpack and opened the door. "Hey, Eli." "Yeah?" "If anyone gives you trouble today, you call me. I don't care what time it is." Eli smiled faintly. "I know, Dad." Inside the school, Eli braced himself for stares and whispers. But when he walked into homeroom, something unexpected happened. A girl named Maya, who sat 2 rows over and had never spoken to him before, turned around and said, "That video of your dad and his friends was awesome. Those guys deserved it." Eli blinked, unsure how to respond. Thanks?" Another kid, a quiet boy named Dante, who played trombone in the band, chimed in. "Seriously, man, my little brother's autistic, and people mess with him all the time. It's cool that someone stood up." Throughout the day, more students approached him, not with pity but with respect. Some shared their own stories of being bullied. Others just wanted to say they thought what the bikers did was right. By lunchtime, Eli realized something. He wasn't the victim of the story anymore. He was part of something bigger. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in the garage of his auto shop, wrenching on a '72 Chevy, when Ray walked in carrying 2 coffees. "You see the news?" Ray asked, handing him a cup. "Hard to miss." Ray leaned against the workbench. "Channel 7 wants to do a feature on the club. Local bikers stand up to bullies. That kind of thing." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "What did you tell them?" "That we'd think about it." Ray took a sip of coffee. "But between you and me, I think we should do it. Not for us. For the other kids out there who don't have 40 bikers to back them up. Show people that standing up doesn't take a gang. It just takes one person willing to make noise." Marcus thought about Eli's question that morning. Do I matter? He thought about the hundreds of messages from parents, teachers, and advocates thanking the Iron Riders for doing what so many others had been too afraid to do. "All right," he said, "but we do it on our terms. No drama, no heroics, just the truth." Ray grinned. "Deal." That evening, Marcus sat on the porch with Eli, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world felt a little quieter, a little safer. Eli was building a model train engine, his hands steady and focused. Marcus watched him work, marveling at the precision, the care. "Dad?" Eli said without looking up. "Yeah? I think I want to join the club. When I'm older." Marcus smiled. "Yeah? Yeah, I want to help people, like you guys did." Marcus didn't trust himself to speak. He just reached over and squeezed Eli's shoulder. And in that moment, he knew. Everything they'd done, every mile they'd ridden, every stand they'd taken, it had all been worth it. If you believe in standing up for what's right, smash that like button. Let's spread this message together. The story didn't end at Westridge Mall. Within a week, the video had been viewed over 15 million times. News segments aired across the country. Interviews were conducted, and op-eds were written debating the ethics of vigilante justice versus community accountability. But for Marcus and the Iron Riders, the real impact wasn't measured in clicks or shares. It was measured in the letters that started arriving. The first came from a mother in Ohio. Her son, also autistic, had been bullied relentlessly at his high school. She wrote that after seeing the video, she'd contacted a local motorcycle club, and they'd agreed to escort her son to school for a week, just to send a message. The bullying stopped. Another letter came from a teacher in Texas who'd organized an assembly on empathy and inclusion, using the Iron Riders' response as a case study. Students who'd never spoken about their own struggles came forward. The school implemented a peer mentorship program. A father in Oregon wrote that he'd started a support group for parents of children with autism, inspired by the way Marcus had shown up for Eli without hesitation. The group now met weekly, sharing resources and stories of resilience. Ray brought the stack of letters to the clubhouse one Saturday afternoon. The Iron Riders gathered around the long wooden table, passing the letters from hand to hand, reading in silence. Some of the men wiped their eyes. Others just nodded, their jaws set with quiet determination. "We did something right," Ray said finally, "and people noticed." Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So what do we do with it?" A biker named Colt, a former Marine with a scar running down his left cheek, spoke up. "We keep doing it. We make it official. We start a program, Bikers Against Bullying. We partner with schools, community centers, wherever kids need backup." Another member, a soft-spoken mechanic named Lou, added, "We could do workshops, teach kids how to stand up for each other, show parents they're not alone." Marcus listened, the gears in his mind turning. He thought about Eli, about the way his son had walked into school that Monday, with his head a little higher. He thought about all the other Elis out there, the ones who didn't have a convoy of motorcycles ready to answer the call. "All right," he said, "let's build it." Over the next month, the Iron Riders launched Stand Tall, a non-profit initiative focused on anti-bullying advocacy and autism awareness. They partnered with local schools to host assemblies where bikers shared their own stories of being outcasts, misfits, and survivors. They organized rides to raise funds for families navigating the challenges of autism. They even created a hotline where kids could report bullying anonymously, with the promise that someone would show up, not with fists, but with presence. Eli became involved too. At first, he was hesitant, unsure if he wanted to relive the memory of that day at the mall. But when he attended his first school assembly and saw the way younger kids looked at him, not with pity, but with admiration, something shifted. He started speaking at events, his voice quiet but steady, sharing what it felt like to be different and how much it mattered when people stood up. "I used to think being autistic made me weak," Eli said at one assembly, standing beside his father. "But my dad taught me that being different isn't weakness, it's just different, and the people who love you don't try to change you. They just show up." The applause was deafening. Marcus stood off to the side, his arms crossed, his eyes glistening. Ray leaned over and muttered, "Kid's braver than all of us combined." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, he is." The program grew faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, Iron Riders chapters in 3 states had launched their own Stand Tall initiatives. A national news network ran a feature, and donations poured in. But Marcus kept the mission simple. Show up, stand tall, make noise when it matters. One evening, as Marcus and Eli worked side by side in the garage, Eli painting details on a model train, Marcus rebuilding a carburetor, Eli spoke without looking up. "Dad, do you think what you did that day was scary for those guys?" Marcus paused, wrench in hand. "Probably." "Good," Eli said. "They should have been scared. They were mean." Marcus smiled. "You know, bud, the goal isn't to scare people. It's to make them think, to make them realize that their actions have consequences." Eli considered this, then nodded. "I get it, but I'm still glad they were scared." Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Yeah, me too." Outside, the sun set in streaks of orange and purple. The world kept turning. But inside that garage, father and son had built something unshakable, a bond forged not just in blood, but in the shared understanding that standing up for what's right is never optional. It's essential. 3 months after the incident at Westridge Mall, Marcus received a call from the mall manager. "Mr. Carter, I wanted to reach out personally. We're hosting an Autism Awareness Day next month, and we'd be honored if you and the Iron Riders would be part of it." Marcus was silent for a moment. "What kind of involvement are we talking about?" "A presence," the manager said. "We want to show the community that this mall is a safe space for everyone. We're partnering with local autism advocacy groups, setting up booths, hosting activities for families. We thought having you and your club there would send a powerful message." Marcus didn't answer right away. He thought about Eli, about whether returning to the place where he'd been humiliated would help or hurt. That evening, he asked his son directly, "They want us to go back to the mall for an event. You comfortable with that?" Eli looked up from his homework, his expression unreadable. "Will those guys be there? The ones who—" "No," Marcus said firmly. "They're banned for life." Eli thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll go. But only if you're with me. Always," Marcus said. On the day of the event, the Iron Riders arrived early. 40 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot in formation, engines rumbling like a heartbeat. This time, though, the atmosphere was different. There were no angry stares, no fearful whispers. Instead, families waved. Kids ran up to admire the bikes. Parents snapped photos. Inside the mall, the food court had been transformed. Banners hung from the ceiling proclaiming Autism Awareness Day. Booths lined the perimeter, offering resources, activities, and support for families. A small stage had been set up in the center, where speakers would share stories throughout the day. Eli stood beside his father, his hands tucked into his pockets, his eyes scanning the crowd. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, approached shyly. "Are you Eli?" she asked. Eli blinked, surprised. "Yeah. My mom showed me the video. You're brave." Eli didn't know what to say. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled at the girl. "Thank you. That means a lot." As the day went on, Eli found himself surrounded by people who understood. Parents who shared their own struggles. Kids who talked about their favorite things without fear of judgment. For the first time in a long time, Eli didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he belonged. Later, Marcus was asked to speak on stage. He climbed the steps, the microphone feeling foreign in his hands. He wasn't a public speaker. He was a mechanic, a biker, a father. But when he looked out at the crowd, at Eli standing in the front row, at Ray and the other riders lining the back, at the families who'd shown up to learn and support, he found his voice. "I'm not here to tell you I'm a hero," Marcus began. "I'm just a dad who showed up when his kid needed him, and that's what we all should do. Show up. Not just for our own kids, but for every kid who needs someone in their corner." He paused, his eyes finding Eli. "Because every kid matters, every single one." The applause was thunderous. Eli's face turned red, but he was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Marcus stepped off the stage and wrapped his son in a hug. "Proud of you, bud. Proud of you too, Dad." As the event wound down, Marcus and the Iron Riders mingled with families, answered questions about the bikes, and posed for photos. It wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about connection, about showing the world that kindness and accountability could coexist. That night, as they rode home under a sky full of stars, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The road stretched out ahead, endless and open, and for the first time he wasn't running from the past. He was riding toward the future, with his son, his brothers, and a community that had learned to stand tall. A year after the incident, Marcus stood in the garage of the Iron Riders clubhouse, surrounded by photos, newspaper clippings, and letters pinned to a corkboard. The Stand Tall program had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. Chapters in 12 states now, partnerships with over 50 schools, a documentary in production. But the thing Marcus was proudest of wasn't on any wall. It was sitting at the workbench beside him. Eli, now 18, was rebuilding the carburetor of a 1985 Harley Sportster. His movements were precise, methodical, his focus absolute. Marcus watched him work, marveling at how much his son had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence. Eli still had hard days. The world was still loud and overwhelming sometimes. But he'd learned to navigate it, to find his place within the chaos. "Dad," Eli said without looking up, "I've been thinking." "Yeah? I want to do a ride. Just me and you, cross-country, like you've always talked about." Marcus set down the wrench he'd been holding. "You serious?" Eli finally looked up, his eyes steady. "Yeah, I think it's time." Marcus grinned. "All right, let's do it." 2 months later, Marcus and Eli stood in the driveway at dawn, their bikes packed with gear. Ray and a few other riders had come to see them off. "You sure you don't want company?" Ray asked. Marcus shook his head. "This one's just for us." Ray nodded, understanding. "Ride safe, brothers." Marcus and Eli mounted their bikes, engines roaring to life in unison. They pulled out of the driveway and onto the open road, the sun rising ahead of them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The miles stretched out like a promise, of freedom, of healing, of a future built on the foundation of love and loyalty. As they rode, Eli felt the wind in his face, the rumble of the engine beneath him, and the steady presence of his father beside him. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel different. He felt whole. Marcus glanced over at his son, his heart swelling with pride. They'd started this journey a year ago in a mall food court, surrounded by cruelty and fear. But they'd ended it here, on the open road, free and unafraid, because that's what standing tall meant, not just showing up in the hard moments, but building a life where those moments no longer defined you, where you rode not away from the pain, but towards something better. together. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the winding mountain road. Marcus Carter sat on his Harley at the overlook, his eyes scanning the valley below, where the lights of the town were just beginning to flicker on. Behind him, the rumble of 40 engines fell silent as the Iron Riders pulled up in formation. Ray dismounted and walked over, his grey beard now mostly white, his leather vest worn soft from years of riding. "Hell of a view," he said, pulling a thermos from his saddlebag. Marcus nodded. Eli picked it, said this is where he wanted to do it. As if summoned by his name, Eli appeared from around the bend, riding the 1985 Harley Sportster he'd rebuilt himself. Behind him rode Maya, the girl from homeroom who'd told him the video was awesome, now his fiancée of 6 months. They pulled up beside Marcus, engines cutting in unison. Eli removed his helmet, his movements no longer nervous or hesitant. At 23, he'd grown into himself in ways Marcus had once only hoped for. He worked as a machinist at the auto shop, led stand-tall assemblies across 3 states, and had just published a memoir about growing up autistic in a world that didn't always understand. "Everyone here?" Eli asked, looking at the convoy of bikers spread across the overlook. Marcus smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Eli reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a bronze plaque, freshly engraved. The words read, "Stand Tall Overlook," dedicated to every kid who ever felt different and every person who stood up when it mattered. May this place remind us that we are never truly alone. Together, the Iron Riders carried the plaque to a stone monument they'd built the week before, setting it into place with reverence. No speeches were made, no grand declarations, just 40 men standing in silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Maya squeezed Eli's hand. "Your dad must be proud." Eli looked at Marcus, who stood with his arms crossed, eyes glistening in the fading light. "Yeah," Eli said softly. "I think he is." As the stars began to appear overhead, the bikers mounted their machines one final time. But before they left, Eli walked over to his father and pulled him into a long embrace. "Thanks for showing up, Dad, that day at the mall, and every day since." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "That's what family does, son. We show up." The engines roared back to life, and the Iron Riders rode down the mountain as a single unit, a brotherhood forged not in perfection, but in the unwavering commitment to stand tall when the world tried to make them small. And as the sound of their engines faded into the night, the plaque remained, a silent testament to the power of presence, the strength of community, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son who had learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to look away. The lesson had been taught, the legacy had been built, and the road ahead stretched on, infinite and unafraid. Thank you for riding with us. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more stories of courage, loyalty, and standing tall coming your way. Until next time, ride safe, stand tall, and never let anyone tell you that you don't matter.